Yesterday I very innocently, Paul, put a little one sentence up on Twitter that said Sidney Crosby is a better all-around player than Wayne Gretzky. Um, I got a lot of attention from that. The last time I looked, it was over 60,000 views on just that one little sentence. So, um, and when you write something like that, it feels like you're a heretic, that you're a homer. There's all kinds of things wrong with putting that up on Twitter. But you've seen um, Crosby play every game he's played since he showed up here 20 years ago. Um, is that a statement that should have me dragged away and beaten up by hockey fans everywhere?
No, my favorite thing is to say, like, if you beamed Sidney Crosby back to the era when Wayne Gretzky was playing, and you just were able to just take the Sidney Crosby product, let's say even one a little younger version of Sid, but even now he's still great. And you beamed him back to that era, he would have 200 points. I mean, because he's just as uh, creative. He has similar uh, hockey IQ, and he has all the skills. I mean, he's a tremendous skater. He's more physical player. He has a different way of generating offense because we always kid about him being the king of the grinders because he can make those plays in the offensive zone off the wall and stuff like that, and win physical battles to get possession of the puck and then make great plays off the boards, like turn from his check, find the open man, and make the pass right away. Plus, he has all those little tricks he does with his stick to deflect pucks, knock pucks out of midair. I could go on and on. There's a lot of subtlety to his game that, if you could probably make a highlight reel of Sidney Crosby without ever showing a goal
Yeah.
that he scored, and you would see amazing things. And the same thing with Mario. Now, you said about Wayne Gretzky. See, the thing, each of those three players has qualities that separate them from other players and from each other. For
Hmm.
Gretzky, it was the innovative style, the fact that he started to play that way when nobody else was playing that way. So you have to give him high marks for his creativity and the fact that he kind of was a revolutionary player, similar to the way Bobby Orr changed the game. So you got to give him a lot of credit for that. You can't remove that from the equation when you're talking about his greatness. And with Mario, it's the reach, right? It's the fact that he was as tall as he was, and he could torture goaltenders with that long reach and other players as well. Plus, he had the vision, and I think he was a better goal scorer than Sid. Wayne Gretzky was a better goal scorer than people give him credit for because they like to focus on his playmaking ability.
Yeah.
So it's not fair, really, to start talking about who's a better player, to be honest with you. But Sidney Crosby could generate just as much offense, in my opinion, that Wayne Gretzky generated if you beamed him back to that era playing exactly the way he plays now. But there were very few players playing the way Wayne Gretzky played back in his era.
I this mic's working okay. The thing is, when obviously when you look at Wayne Gretzky, he's got 8 million points, and he's got, if you took away his goals, he'd still be the leading scorer, I think, in the history of the league. Um, and everybody knows all that. I mean, his numbers are insane. But as you said, it's with Crosby, you could show a highlight reel that didn't include him scoring a goal. Sometimes you could show a highlight reel, I think, he doesn't even have an assist. It's just
I agree.
and so Crosby, Wayne Gretzky. Is it fair to say that Wayne Gretzky is defined more by his points than anything else? But Crosby, I mean, I can't think of a specific example, but there will be times when you'll see Crosby go into the corner and fight for the puck for 28 seconds and just be relentless and be Sidney Crosby, and the puck will finally come out of the corner and it'll end up in the Penguins on a Penguin stick, and it'll stay in the offensive zone. And 32 seconds later, they score a goal, but they don't get that goal if Crosby doesn't go in the corner and just fight like hell with somebody and get the puck and keep the play in the offensive zone. That's something that Gretzky didn't spend a total of 10 minutes in the corners in his career. If he added every minute he spent in the corner, he wouldn't add up to 10 minutes.
I agree with you. That's the difference. What I may say, he's the king of the grinders. Plus, Sid is a phenomenal 200-foot player. See, back in that day, when Wayne Gretzky was putting up the big numbers, one of the last guys, maybe the last guy to win the Art Ross Trophy before he started reeling them all off as the leading scorer was Brian Trottier. And there was an argument for a minute there about who was the better player, Brian Trottier or Wayne Gretzky, because Trotz was such a great two-way player and physical and all that,
Yeah.
kind of like Sid is now.
Yeah.
But he wasn't in the same level as Sid. So that's the thing that makes them different. And maybe you said all around player. Is he a better all around player than Wayne Gretzky? There isn't any question about that. I mean, does things that Wayne Gretzky didn't even think or he had to do or want to do because he had other players who could do the work for him. But Sid, just by nature, he likes to play the game the way he does, and he wins faceoffs. He defends really well. The only thing Sid doesn't do, and Wayne didn't do it either, is kill penalties. And Mario killed penalties. I think Wayne might have killed a few, but Mario really killed a lot of penalties, and he was the best penalty killer ever when he decided to be. He still holds a record for shorthanded goals in the season with 13. So all three of them, what I find amazing is if you look up average points per game, and I don't have it in front of me, but all these guys who people say before they even really start to play regularly in the NHL, they say he's the next great player, when they're 12.
Right.
And then all those guys' names are right there at the top. So it's pretty clear who the generational players are, even from the time they're little kids. Connor McDavid in the same category, and Wayne Gretzky scored 300 some goals one year, as a 12 or 13-year-old or whatever it was. No, he was younger than that. I think he was 11 when he scored 300 goals for the Nadrowski Steelers up there in Brantford. So he's the greatest Steeler of all time, by the way, Wayne Gretzky. So it's just entertaining to talk about it because what it does is the conversation leads you to describing the players and what they do. And then you start to think about how great they really are and why. So, one of the things I urge anybody to do when they start talking about Wayne Gretzky and how great was he, just watch a video of him. He was unbelievable. He was an unbelievable hockey player. He had such a cool, creative way of playing it. He had that bent over skating style. He saw the ice like nobody's business. He did play with great players, but he made them greater because he was able to make the plays that he made to them. And what's different, and Mario said this at the Old Timers game at the Winter Classic in Pittsburgh years ago. Mario played in the Old Timers game, and he was interviewed afterwards, and he said the difference is today, Gretzky couldn't curl up like he did back then because of the back pressure. In other words, he would come in just over the blue line or sometimes even in the neutral zone. He would pull up and pirouette and turn, and that would buy time for the guys coming late. Then he would find somebody coming late, and he would hit them with a pass, and they'd be like Paul Coffey, and they would fly into the offensive zone. But if you curl up like that today, you got pressure on you from back. Coaches stress it so much more. So you don't have that same amount of time to make those plays that he used to make. He had more time and space, I think, back then because teams just didn't check the way they do now. But Mario would be pretty much in the same category, except that he took a beating. He was the Wayne didn't take the beating that Mario did, not even close. And Mario's size was both an advantage and a disadvantage because the referee said, "Oh, he can take care of himself," So they would let people abuse him, and it just wasn't right.
That's why he retired.
Well, he did retire the first time because of it. He was sick of it.
Yeah.
He came back with Sid after they took the red line out, which is cool. It would have been interesting to see how those guys played too without the red line. So, Mario loved to poach up ice, and Tom Barrasso would throw a 65-foot pass to him, for a breakaway. Things like that. So there's just the games, the changes in the game in every sport. When you start talking about players, would he be great now, or was he as good then because there was different? All those conversations like we're having now, they're just so rhetorical and sort of fantastical in a lot of ways. So that's why I like to use the thing. If I beamed Sid back as he is now, and plugged him right into that scene, what would he do? And I think he'd score 200 points. And if you brought Gretzky in today, he might not. I don't know. I would say that it'd be harder for him to go from that era to this era than it is for Sid to go the other way.
Yeah, and the other thing, I remember you telling me that you don't have to. I think I remember the player who said it, but I won't tell. You don't have to mention the player. There was a game. I think Gretzky was with the Kings, and he took a big check from somebody. I think it might have been Bob Airy, and put a big check on him. And
That's who it was.
within 2 seconds, there were eight. Somehow the Kings managed to put 8 people on the ice to jump on Airy and start beating the hell out of him. And all he did was check him. It wasn't nothing, not even a questionable hit or anything like that. And in the locker room after the game, I forget who it was. I think I know who it was, but you tell me if you want. Somebody said, "Well, he didn't have to hit him that hard." Isn't
It
that
was
what they
Paul
said?
Coffey. Paul Coffey said
Paul Coffey said he didn't have to hit him that hard. Can
it.
you
Yes,
imagine
he
somebody
did.
saying that about Lemieux or Crosby?
No, I think
And
you
of course,
know,
Coffey was his former teammate.
yeah, and that's why he said it. But
Yeah.
yeah, but that was sort of the prevailing thinking at the time, is that Wayne Gretzky is this golden,
Well, why wasn't Lemieux then?
calf that has to be treated, with the extra deferential treatment because he's such a great player for the game.
Yeah, but
It's for
why
the good
wasn't
of the
Lemieux
game. We
looked
can't
at
we
that
can't
that
pick
way?
on Mario. Never had to deal. Mario. Listen, I remember Zdeno Chara hauling off and punching Sid right in the face, right in the teeth, with a vicious uppercut type punch right in front of the net. Phenomenal replay of it where you can see exactly what he did in that series back in 2013 when the Bruins swept the Penguins. That was the year Sid missed a lot of games at the end of the year because he took a slap shot off the face and broke his jaw. And so he was out for a while. He comes back and he's with a broken jaw, basically, that just healed. And Zdeno Chara, who's 6'9", punches him right in the face in front of the net. And I don't even think he got a penalty. And, that's the kind of stuff that great
Well,
players have to put up with. And that's why Wayne Gretzky had Marty McSorley and Dave Semenko, to protect him his whole career. And Mario had, at the end of his career, he had Rick Tocchet and Kevin Stevens on either wing. And also at the very beginning of Mario's career, which a lot of people tend to forget, his rookie year, he had Warren Young playing on the left wing, who scored 40 goals. And everybody said, that's easy to do, which it really wasn't, because he had a ton of wingers for the first 5 years of his career.
they didn't
But
score 40. Yeah.
that was a great accomplishment by Warren Young. But Warren Young just so happened to be one of the toughest guys in the league. So actually, Mario in his rookie year had a guy who could protect him right from the start. He just didn't have one for the next 7, 8, 10 years until Rick Tocchet and Kevin Stevens came along.
Now I got to ask you this: you're the guy who picked Mario Lemieux up at the airport back in 1984, I guess June of 1984, July, whatever, right after he was drafted, and he spoke very little, not very good English, and so what do you remember about that moment when you saw him come off the plane, and what was going through his head, and what did he think when he came through the tunnel the first time?
Well, it was pretty cool because he came out of the airport. That old Pittsburgh airport had a circular driveway, and the limo guy pulled up. It was a town car, and we pulled up, and I was sitting in the front seat. I rode out there with the driver, and we got to the airport, and I watched Mario come out the door with his dad and his agent, who was a guy named Bob Perno. He was actually the French Canadian agent for Mario. He had Gus Badali was his main agent. It was also Gretzky's agent. And they came out and they got in the car and they all sat across the back seat. And Mario was sitting in the middle. And I just remember looking back at him as we drove and talking to him. And I talked to Bob Perno the most because he could speak good English. He used French, but his dad didn't say a word. His dad couldn't speak English at all. He was a quiet guy to begin with. And then Mario, just how he likes to nod. He's a man of few words.
Like
Even today,
yeah.
he's the same way. He gives you the nod. It's good enough for me. You know what I mean? So I said to him, "Where do you see the view when we come through the tunnel?" And then when he came through, I looked at him and he gave me the, and that was about all it took. I mean, it didn't need to be much more than that.
Yeah.
I don't remember there being a lot of conversation just because of the nature of the situation. I think Bob Perno probably and I spoke to each other the most, but it was pretty cool. I mean, I still have a real vivid memory of it because it was Mario. And then we went to PPG Place. It had just been built in a beautiful building. I showed him that, and then we went up to the Hyatt, and you were waiting there to interview him because I gave you the tip that I'd be bringing him in.
Yeah,
you were with
I
Channel
had the
4.
first interview with him. Yeah.
Yeah, that was cool.
After he became a Penguin. Yeah.
We were really lucky, and back then there were a few people like us who were shills for the Penguins. I worked for the Penguins, and we loved hockey, and we wanted people to appreciate the sport. So when we told people that Mario Lemieux was going to save the Penguins and he was going to be unbelievable and he's another Wayne Gretzky, and wait till you see this guy, there were a lot of people who kind of rolled their eyes at us and probably figured that we were just overselling.
Well, let me tell you something. I did a commentary, and first of all, I wrote in my column in the Post Gazette probably like 1986 86, 87. I wrote, just in case you were wondering, you now live in the city with the greatest hockey player in the world, which was my way of saying he's better than Wayne Gretzky. That's how soon I was willing to say that. And then I did and then the Penguins still weren't drawing big crowds. They weren't a very good team, and Lemieux, as you know, that there were a lot of people in the Pittsburgh sports media who didn't like hockey, made fun of hockey, were annoyed that they had to cover hockey. And the fact that Mario Lemieux was there kind of made him, this kid was pretty special. I guess I have to go see this guy. And a lot of them didn't even come around to even liking hockey till they won the cup in '91. And so I did a commentary on KDKA. I can still remember Ray Tannehill sitting next to me, and I said, I said, the Penguins are still drawn, there's still a lot of empty seats at the arena. I said, I don't know if everybody gets this or not, but we're dealing with Babe Ruth here. That's what I said. I said, you need to understand, he's Babe Ruth. You need to go see him. Just, and at that time, how many games were you televising? 25, 30 games a year? And
Yep.
I said, and I could feel Ray Tannehill kind of looking at me like, what's he talking about? Because he was a good guy, liked sports, but he was like everybody else. Hockey was an odd sport to him. Well, as you know, you came to work for KDK after that, not long after that. After that, I'd be sitting in our little area in the sports area, and all of a sudden I'd hear yelling, reaction, laughing. Oh my God! And it was Lemieux. Lemieux had done, by the time, not long after I said he was Babe Ruth, you looked over in the end of the newsroom and everybody was looking up at the monitor because the Penguins were playing and Lemieux had just scored his 4th goal of the game. So it took a while for people to catch on. But, and it wasn't about being a shill. It was like, I saw the guy play, it's,
Yeah,
I
it's for hockey people. It was not a surprise that he was that great. There were some who wondered if he would be able to play in the NHL because of his, they in the Quebec League back in those days. The guys would put up huge numbers in the Quebec League, and they would say, "Well, it's an offensive league, and they don't check in that league." And if you remember, there were some people that actually liked Kirk Muller better than Mario in that draft.
Oh yeah, they wanted
Morons,
to draft
basically.
him. Yeah.
But the point is that there were things about Mario's past that made them wonder if he was going to be able to compete at the NHL level with that style of play.
Being a dog, he was accused of loafing.
Neil Smith called him. Neil Smith, who later became GM of the Rangers, should have been disqualified from any job in management after he said and was quoted in the Hockey News as saying he was a dog. So, I think
it's like saying Babe Ruth is a dog. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think it's great though, because that's really what you wanted back then. You needed the Penguins to become relevant and for the Penguins to finally be appreciated by the masses. And I always wished for that. It was hard to get people to think that way in Pittsburgh with the Steelers being so big. They blocked out the sun at that time. But I always thought that hockey would be just as appealing to people in Pittsburgh as football is if they saw the game being played the right way and by somebody who could bring you out of your seat like that. So we're really lucky to have been able to kind of live through that and see him blossom the way he did and see hockey grow in the city the way it did.
Followed by Yager and Crosby.
Well, no, I mean now you have a list that runs off the end of a legal pad of the great players that have come through Pittsburgh.
Yeah,
it's really a miracle, to be honest with you. I can't believe it. I remember Mike Lang saying to me after he saw Bobby Smith play for the Minnesota North Stars as a rookie, he had been the first pick overall. And Mikey was always upset because we always traded our first round picks and we never got one of those players.
Yeah.
And we're walking out of the Civic Arena, we're walking in the concourse after a game one night. He's carrying his briefcase and he says, "I just want one player. Just give me one player, one player."
He said a few.
You know what I mean? And a couple of years later, we had Mario Lemieux, and then we got more than one. You got many, including Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin much later, but.
Well, I remember
able to have that many great players play in Pittsburgh who were in that upper echelon of the the greatest players, generational players. It's almost unfair.
Well, I remember Lemieux's second home game at least. His first game was a big deal, big crowd. I think he got in a fight his first
Yeah,
game.
he did.
Yeah, he got in a fight. Debut. Everybody loved him, and the crowd went nuts and everything. Well, I was, I was working, so I went to the second game, and there was a typical Penguin crowd there, about 8,000 people, ton of empty seats at the arena. This was game two, okay? And Lemieux, you know what the fans were like back then. They went to the games. They wanted to be miserable. The whole thing was the Penguins were so bad that people would go to the games and they got enjoyment out of making fun of the Penguins and booing them and all that. I'll never forget. Lemieux's got the puck and he's skating up the ice, and because it was such a small crowd, you hear one guy yell out, "Come on, Lemieux, you dog!" That's this was the second game of his career. He's a 19-year-old kid. I wonder where that guy is right now. But those don't you remember those people? That's who
Oh no, no,
populated the arena.
yeah, there was a cynical crowd there that they were jaded, and I understand why they were.
Yeah,
They've gone from being jaded to being spoiled, right? I mean,
yeah,
it's just that's the way it was. But there were people wearing bags over their heads and all that in the early '80s. I
yeah.
mean, it was bad. But I remember Ed DeBartolo coming to a game. There was about maybe 3,800 people there, and he was standing in the lower bowl there, behind the last row, just standing looking out at the ice. And he's the owner of the team, and I'm thinking, man, what is he thinking right now?
He
This
went
was,
out of here.
yeah, and he was quick to tell you how much money he lost and all that, even when he won the cup. Mike Lang and I drove up to Youngstown, up to Boardman, Ohio, to the headquarters of the Bartolo Corporation, and he gave us our Stanley Cup rings. And that was a pretty cool day.
Yeah,
Mikey drove. I remember it well. We rode up. We got there, and DeBartolo came into the conference room with these little boxes, gift wrapped boxes, and you know how those conference room tables are slippery.
yeah.
He just flipped them down the table at us, and then we opened them up and looked at them, and then he told us the story about how he bought the Penguins, and he went into the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
And he just couldn't help himself. He had to talk about the investment he made and all. But I could tell he was not happy that he had to sell. His son screwed up the business, and he was forced to get some cash, so they had to sell the team, which turned out to be both a blessing and a curse, I guess, more of a blessing than a curse in the long run, because by going bankrupt with the Howard Baldwin ownership, it created a situation where Mario had money that was owed to him, which he then turned into getting control of the team out of bankruptcy, which allowed him to save the team again. And then when he did that, he was able to, be smart enough as the owner to tear the team down before the lockout, which he really advocated for. And coming out of the lockout, Penguins had only a 15% chance of winning the lottery. It wasn't like they were,
Right.
like when you finish last and you get that first pick overall, you have a high percentage. It wasn't that great a percentage, and we got unbelievably lucky to get Sidney Crosby. He moves into Mario's house, and he becomes Sidney
Unbelievable
Crosby.
story.
I mean, you can't even, no one would, if you wrote a movie script like that, you'd go, it'll never happen.
Right, right. Yeah. I know you got work to do today, and I'm just out here, sitting in my underwear doing my little podcast. But thanks for coming on, and we'll have you on again to talk about. Well, Sid's gonna, unless something drastic happens, he's gonna be the first guy to have average a point a game for 20 years, which is ridiculous. That could happen any day now. So.
And I don't even know, I can't even begin to tell you what a great person he is.
Well,
So,
that's the other. That's
I
not even.
mean,
That's a total. He's been here 20,
but
20 years.
part of what makes him a great player is who he is as a person.
Hmm.
You know, there's no question in my mind about that,
Do
because
you think you could find anybody within 20 miles of the arena of PPG who would say something bad about Sidney Crosby? One
never,
person
no,
after 20
not
years.
possible,
I'm
not
serious.
possible.
Is there anybody? Have
No,
you
there's
ever
no
heard
one.
somebody?
Only somebody who's jealous.
Yeah.
There can't be anybody who's been around him and has really kind of followed his career and off the ice, who could possibly say that. It's impossible. He's like he always wants sports figures to be role models, but
Yeah.
he's just a role model by the way he is. He doesn't go out of his way to prove that he is. It just, after so much time of him being the guy that he is, word gets around that he's the person that he is.
Yeah. I just got to ask you one last thing before we break this up. Uh, could you make a case? Just make a case for Mario Lemieux and Sidney Crosby being the two best hockey players ever.
Yeah, I think you could. I mean,
I mean, you wouldn't be laughed out. You shouldn't be laughed out of the
see,
room if you suggest it.
well, here's the thing. There's another guy out there. His name's Connor McDavid. If you've ever
He's pretty
watched
good.
him, he's the fastest player ever. He can make plays at that high rate of speed. He's the most dominant offensive force I've ever seen in hockey. Okay, so I'm just telling you right now, like if you put him back in that era, you beamed him back, it would be
Maybe
a joke.
300.
It'd be a joke. He would go around every player on every rush up the ice. Now people talk about the physicality of the game, and you could stick guy, you could whack guys on the wrists, you could do all that. That's all true. It's all true. But a lot of those guys that were doing that whacking and hacking, they couldn't skate. You know what I mean? So
He couldn't. They're not catching him.
no, I mean, and so it's kind of like that argument. Well, you have the naturals, you have the guys that were great players in their sport, but maybe they didn't have the longevity,
Yeah.
or different things, affected their careers. Like Bobby Orr, for instance, by the way, there's another guy who you can make a pretty good argument for as being, up. He's certainly up there. I mean, but why, as I said earlier, just look at the average points per game in the playoffs and look at that. And you'll see every name we've spoken of, and you can add one more, and it'll be Mike Bossy, who was a great player, but he had a shorter career. So his average points per game didn't diminish because he didn't stay in the game as long. He had a bad back. Yeah. And another guy, of course, is Alexander Ovechkin, who's great in his own way as a goal scorer. He's the greatest goal scorer who ever lived. I don't think there's any doubt about that because it's a lot harder to score goals today than it was then. And goalies are much bigger, and it's just a different game. But hey, I'm just lucky to have all these guys. But the best thing is we had Mario and Sid and Yager, another guy, by the way, who you might want to put in that conversation. So we've been really lucky.
Yep. Hey, well, thanks, and go to work.
All right. See you later.
All right. See ya.